Everybody, welcome to the book Leads Impactful Books for Life and Leadership. I'm your series host and leadership performance coach, John Jaramillo. This podcast series is about getting to the books that have impacted the lives of the people and the leaders in my network. So these are the great leads that will share great books with us, the ones that have influenced and impacted their work, their life, their business, whatever it may be. All those worlds intersect. And in this series, I cover three categories of book. The first category, where they're sharing a book with me I haven't read. The second category, where we're both covering a book that we've both read, whether specifically for that episode we're recording or we both read it by chance in our past lives before the series. The third category is when I have the author and or publisher on to share the book, to give it a face, to give it a tone, to give it some backstory, and then to learn about the person that's put so much into that book. And my guest today is Darrell. And Laura is a top-selling leadership author and guest speaker passionate about franchisee and franchisor success, organizational health, and leadership development. She has more than 25 years of people, team, departmental leadership experience with some of Canada and the world's most iconic brands. She holds a master's degree in organizational leadership from Royal Roads University with thesis research focused on how enhanced collaboration between multidisciplinary key stakeholders can lead to better business outcomes for both. And this is the second time that I've had Laura on for a conversation. The first one was, I just looked it up this morning, all the way back in episode 53, where we covered Coach John Wooden's book, Wooden on Leadership, and that was in June of 2023. So it's just incredible how time flies by. When I had Laura, having seen that she'd put out a new book, I said, you want to run it back and try another episode for the newest book, and she was game. I'm appreciative of that. But it is incredible how when you have a conversation with somebody like we did in the first episode, and then you see what they're doing on LinkedIn, what they're sharing, what they're getting involved in, what they're putting out there for their clients, for their audience. It's incredible how it seems like we just spoke just yesterday, but that it's been, coming up on 2 years. So Laura, thank you for coming back.
Oh my gosh, my pleasure, John. Super excited to be here. Loved our last conversation. So looking forward to today.
Yeah, it was amazing. We were talking before I hit record. I had heard of Coach Wooden before our conversation, before our first podcast, but the way that you described it based on your experiences, the way that you shared some of his lessons really resonated. And I told you how I'm going to try to incorporate that into coaching my son's soccer team, and they're like 5 to 6 to 7-year-olds. So the jury's still out. We'll see how that happens, how that plays out. Hey, we had our first game on Friday and we won.
Success.
So success. Even if that's the only win of the season, I'll be happy. But in any case, for those that didn't listen in the first episode, and it's been a while since we've spoken, who are you today? Can you go into the work that you're doing, the specifics, whether it's one-on-one, group coaching, whatever, the authorship, you're a writer as well. Who are you today, just so we can get a sense of who's going to walk us through the book we're going to cover today?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, I think today lots has changed, even just in a couple short years. I am still on this journey to, kind of spread the gospel of the impact of positive leadership in organizations, in communities, and society in general. I've gone back to school. I'm doing my doctoral degree in leadership at the University of Charleston, really just trying to, understand, like I think a lot of people these days, what the future of leadership is going to require to fix some pretty serious challenges going on, whether that's in organizations or in, like I said, in society as a whole. I'm really motivated today, John, by just, I don't know, this polarization and this divide that I think has really gone in the wrong direction. I think it's getting bigger and bigger with each passing year, and I am truly motivated to figure out what does the future of leadership need to look like to bridge that divide, to bring people back together. Like I remember a time, back in my day where you could disagree about politics and you could disagree about a whole host of things, and then get together for a barbecue and maybe sit around the fire and have a beer or watch a hockey game, and everything was fine. And
it sounds so alien.
Right? But
Yeah.
like, I remember that time. It wasn't that long ago. So
Yeah.
I don't know. In my semi-retired life, I do some coaching with a few organizations. I speak at a number of events. I'm doing a ton of writing on the subject, studying the future of leadership. But I'm really just invested in figuring out how do we bring people back together, because I know that when we are together and we're collaborating and we're working towards kind of shared purpose or shared goals, things get better. So
Yeah.
that's kind of the path I'm on these days.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. That question, even for people that I bring back, it's kind of like, all right, do we go into that depth because I've already spoken to them, or, how should we approach that? But I was going to bring this up anyway, that it's incredible how even your view of your work can change in just 2 years. So I
Totally.
always keep that question there, because even if you're doing the same work, whether it's one-on-one, group coaching, facilitation, writing, whatever it may be, speaking, just everything that we've been through as a society globally
Yeah,
if somebody's really paying attention, can change how you speak about what you're doing. So I don't think the work that you've done has changed that much since then, like the actual packages, if you will, that you offer.
sure.
But just the language that you're using shows that you're cognizant of like the urgency that's grown because of everything on the outside that just kind of trickles into everything we do and everyone that we are, I guess.
Yeah,
It's incredible how you
absolutely.
just it doesn't matter. Like, it's just 2 years, but just so much has changed.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that, I draw a lot of parallels, from what makes a great organizational culture and what makes great leadership in an organization and why it matters. I draw parallels between the organization and the community. I think it's the same thing. I think people
Yeah.
want to feel a part of something. They want to feel appreciated and valued and seen for who they are and what their contributions are. They want authenticity. I think they just want leaders to tell the truth and just be real honest about kind of where we are and where we're going. And I don't know, the more I try and peel back the onion on the trust question, um, which I think is really interesting. There's this organization called the Edelman Institute, and they kind of track this barometer of trust around the world in leadership, whether that's government, corporations, in the media. This is their thing, and I think probably maybe surprising to some, maybe unsurprising to others, trust has plummeted in the last decade in some of these institutions. And so, I'm really interested in, how do we repair that? How do we bring a style of leadership into these institutions that uh, will start to repair that damaged trust? Because I know, history is a great teacher. If that divide grows and that polarization grows and that trust continues to erode, that just leaves a vacuum for
Yeah.
something else to take over.
Yeah. And I think that approach is amazing, because the approach that you're taking, because I find obviously you watch things on TV and it's almost like no matter what the topic is, you have people from either side and they're just arguing their point, hammering their point, whatever the topic is, whatever the discussion is. And it seems like everything you watch and everything you read, there's rarely a voice that says, that's kind of not that it's their role, but is trying to bring both sides together.
Yeah.
Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, everything is sold on them, us, versus, right?
Yeah.
Um, but there's never really anything I see where it's like both sides sitting down and wanting to understand the other side. You just don't see that anymore. Rarely,
Yeah.
rarely. It's not in the mainstream media, obviously, because
No.
that wouldn't pay the bills. Um, but I forget who I was listening to just the other day, what kind of podcast it was, and they were commenting on the other side. And I think they seemed more open, and this happened to be about politics. They seemed more open to learning about the other side. I'm like, man, just that there's that little hint of, okay, I can see where they're coming from, but and
Yeah.
you never hear that, even if you're passionate about what your side is, there's never, again, plays back to that's not going to sell. It's not going to sell. Like, what are you about? How can we connect? But it's amazing how you just rarely see that. It's always, opposing sides, but
Yeah.
they're there to oppose each other, and that's it. Where
Yeah.
maybe in the past there might have been some conversation outside of that, or respect or courtesy, but there just doesn't seem to be anybody that's trying to not see all sides, but really start a conversation. I
Yeah.
haven't seen a conversation in I don't know how long.
Yeah, it's discouraging. I feel like everybody's gotten so wrapped up in trying to change somebody else's mind when I just, like I said earlier, it doesn't have to be like that. It wasn't always like that. Two things can be true at the same time. Like you can have your perspectives and your opinions, and somebody else can have their perspectives and their opinions, and that used to be okay. But now it seems like we've just become obsessed with, you have to think exactly like I think. You
Yeah,
have to
yeah,
believe exactly what I believe, and
yeah,
I'm fascinated. I'm fascinated by that particular leadership challenge because we've invested so much over the last 20 years, maybe even a bit longer, in this idea of creating, diversity and inclusion and equity. And we've literally created departments and people where this is their sole responsibility. I shouldn't say sole responsibility, but they're the
yeah,
champions of these ideas. Yet the end of that, here we are 20 years later. And I actually think that we're less tolerant than ever before because we're just obsessed with changing people's minds and making sure that everybody believes exactly what I believe. And if you don't, then we can't be friends, or we can't be in the same circle, or we can't, have a conversation. And it's really troubling. And it's going to take, I think, really strong leadership. I'm studying this idea of they're calling it adaptive leadership, and it's really about the role of the leader to create spaces where divergent views and perspectives can come together to collaborate and to work on common challenges and common problems. But it's really a skill that leaders need to create these spaces and to
yeah,
create these environments
yeah,
where that dialogue can happen. But I think it's a good first step, one that's really needed.
yeah. And this idea that we've been discussing, and just you can see how much there is the lack of trust. There's an infusion and feeling of fear. Um, but I think it's going to take everybody understanding that it's not a zero sum game, that we can talk
No.
about all our different needs without it taking away from anybody.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that's the biggest thing, is people feeling my thing is going to be taken away from me, whatever it may be. So
Yeah.
so they approach a conversation with fear instead of, okay, I know this is a conversation at this point right now. This, whatever I'm fearful is going to be taken away from me, is not going to be taken away from me in this conversation. These are
Yeah.
words. We're just having a conversation, and approach it from there. But they just have that fear, like in every instant, that something is going to be taken away, when that's
Yeah.
not the case. I think if people were more confident about where they stood, they could really debate. And there's no problem with debating. There's no
Yeah.
problem with debating, because debating is it has that infusion of respect for each other's points. But in any case, no, I appreciate us touching base on that, because it's incredible how just in the last 2 years that issue has grown that much more.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Um,
it's concerning. I mean, a lot of work to do on that front, because if it's just left unchecked, like, what's it going to look like 2 years from now? What's it going to look like 5 years from now? What
yeah,
what are our kids going to inherit? What are their kids going to inherit?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's got to start somewhere. And I think those that carry the position of leadership, I think it's really incumbent upon all of us to try and figure that out. How do we flip the switch and stop leading through fear and anxiety? Nobody is at their best when they are fearful or anxious. I think we're just missing that positive and compelling vision for the future that we can all rally behind.
What's amazing, and I'm not saying it's going to fix everything, but what's amazing is how much of a ripple effect I think it would have if you did see somebody doing that
Yeah.
in the public eye. Yeah, in mainstream media. Again, mainstream media tricky. because, that's not going to sell.
No.
But it's amazing how I think it'd be a huge lift. It would take a lot to ripple out to the level in society we would want. But I think once you see that modeled, where somebody can argue their point for their point, believe what they want, but then understand the other person didn't come down the same path you did. So they don't see it the same way you did. I think once somebody starts modeling that and you see it more and more, then it's kind of like, okay, that person did that. They argued their side effectively and they weren't scared. So they were listening to the other side.
Yeah.
I think once we see it modeled more and more, people will pick it up, but I
Yeah.
haven't seen it modeled at all.
No.
Even people that are moderate across any issue. Yeah, very rarely do you hear, okay, you have a good point. Okay, that's a good point. But you don't hear that. You just
like
hear sides ramming their values or whatever down the other person's throat. So I don't know. But
we're trying to
we'll
solve the
it.
world's
We'll
problems.
solve it. This one conversation is going to solve it. So Laura, the next question always is, and it's been a while since we've spoken, but to understand how you ended up here, can you give me a walkthrough, just the highlights, the major points in your life up until now, from when maybe you left your education or going into education, just that path of when you left, say, high school to now, just the major points of your development, the work that you've done, what led you to now in your beliefs?
Oh, I love that question. Yeah, well, I think, post high school, I was one of those teenagers that was more interested in getting to work and saving money so that I could see the world than I was in going back to, post secondary. So that's what I did. I started working at a fast food restaurant in Canada called A&W Restaurants. I started as a fry cook. I spent
Thank
10
you for your
years.
service. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you for your service.
I also made onion rings too, but
Nice.
we won't go down there today. But yeah, that's where I started and, kind of worked my way up. I was a regional leader when I left that organization. But during that time, I would kind of save a bunch of money and I would travel a ton, a lot of backpacking through, Eastern Europe, the US, Mexico, because I'm just fascinated by people, fascinated by what makes them tick and, what their cultural experience is like and how that, frames up their thinking about problems that we're kind of all facing, today in similar ways. So I did a ton of traveling. I didn't go back to school, actually. I did a small leadership program at BCIT. It was like a certificate program at a school in Vancouver. But I didn't really go back to school until I decided that I wanted to do my master's degree in leadership. And gosh, that was a bit of a journey unto itself because I didn't have a bachelor's degree. I didn't go to university. So I had to kind of take this alternate path to gain approval to take this program. And I think that, just harkens back to how I was raised, is just like strong work ethic. Don't take no for an answer. There's always a path forward. And so, I had to write a paper or go through panel interviews. They spoke to a number of my employers just to really get a sense for if the work experience I had since leaving high school, in that, gosh, I was almost 40 when I decided to do my master's degree. So they went back and spoke to all of those employers and ultimately determined that I had enough, kind of professional leadership experience that it was the equivalent of a BCom. And then, so they let me into this program. I was the only one in the cohort. So I had all kinds of imposter syndrome and anxiety and all that stuff that goes with that. But yeah, really just thrived in that program. That really helped me get kind of from the director level in my career up to, I was vice president of Boston Pizza. So $1 billion company, 400 units, lot of really good work going on at the organization at the time that I was there. And then, kind of fast forward to today, I'm now semi-retired, living in Mexico City. My husband and I retired about 4 years ago, relocated here to Mexico. And that's when I started, really using my voice. I think a lot of people, might share a similar perspective that, when you're working for an organization or, kind of on that corporate track, you're a little bit limited into kind of what you can say and
Mm.
how you can really stand behind opinion and perspective with some strength. And so, yeah, I think since leaving Canada and leaving my corporate career, I've just really found my voice, and I advocate to day and night anyone that will listen about the power of leadership in across all, whether it's organizations, communities, society as a whole. Gosh, the power of leadership, it can go both ways. The power of, really negative leadership can have some pretty dark impacts, but the power of positive leadership can really shift things. And that's what I'm doing today. I'm writing about it. I'm learning about it. I'm coaching about it. And yeah, it's been quite the journey.
Yeah, it's incredible. The first book that I covered with you was Wooded on Leadership. Obviously, well, not obviously, not to all that might not know John Wooden, but famous college basketball coach. Um, and it's just incredible the coaching aspect of it. It's incredible how you can have leaders that are more managers getting the work done, and then there are leaders who have that coaching aspect, that
Yeah,
coaching ability, and you don't see that too often.
no, and
You
it's
really don't see.
so it's so important. Like, especially as you start to dissect the different generations and what leadership styles are most impactful kind of across that spectrum. And when you start to really kind of peel the layers back on Gen Z, coaching leadership is one of the most impactful leadership styles for them. And if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense, right? Like, these kids were they were grown, they grew up in a hyper coached environment. They were ferried from t-ball to soccer to baseball to dance to piano to, math club to all these different programs at a very, very young age. So they were exposed to feedback, both corrective feedback and appreciative feedback, and coaching
Yeah.
all along the way. Yet, oh my gosh, they show up into the workplace today, and well, you know what
Mm.
it's like. I mean, in some of these workplaces, there is no I mean, there's no training, let alone coaching, and so they really struggle, unnecessarily so, because all of a sudden you go from this hyper coached environment to no coaching whatsoever, and you're kind of left on your own to figure it out. So I hope that script is changing a little bit. I hope more organizations are understanding the power of coaching, the power it has to unleash, talent and develop skill in the workplace. Because certainly for Gen Z, they just demand it, and they'll leave. Like, all the study after study after study will just tell you that if these kids show up at work and there's no mentorship, there's no career planning, there's no coaching, there's no development, they will just go find that elsewhere. It's that important to them.
I mean, I think that's a great aspect because when you're coming into an environment, say you're recently out of college, you're coming into a professional environment, college is only going to get you so much. Like, if you don't supplement that with coaching, as we've spoken about, preparation, I mean, aside from mock interviews in college, aside from resume writing, I think when I volunteered at my local university where I graduated with my master's degrees, when I've gone in and spoken to students, it's like, yeah, your resume looks good, your cover letter looks good, your answer, they're college kids, so they're not quite comfortable in their own skin. A lot of them feel they don't have anything to bring to the table. Some have said, I played sports all through college. I didn't have internships or anything like that, so I don't have anything. Like, essentially, one particular kid said something like, "I don't have anything to bring to the table." And I'm like, okay. He's like, I play baseball. I'm like, all right, tell me about that. He's like, yeah, I was voted captain like my sophomore year. Like, I have to go to training and practice twice a day. We have to keep up a certain GPA. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking
Yeah,
about? Like,
like,
all these, you guys are all going through the same program. in education in the business school, that's great. If you pass that, great. You're all level on that. But what you have is advantageous. You just know
Yeah,
you have to learn how to tell your story. Um,
exactly.
but aside from the education, that's kind of scripted. Everybody, here's the tests, here are the quizzes, here's what we have to teach you, here's what you have to know. But then what do you supplement that with? How do you awaken the person to who they can be based on
Yeah,
who they are? So yeah, if you and some may look at it as like, well, why do they need that? I mean, because that gets the best out of you. If I just bore it, I just gritted my teeth and I didn't have those kind of supplemental supports in the workplace. It was just kind of get the job done and you move up. Get the
yeah,
job done and you move up. How much more would I have gained? How much better would I have felt about my knowledge, my wisdom, your growing wisdom, if somebody had helped you see that and helped you channel it?
yeah.
It's just an additional tool. It's not that they're limited in their capabilities, but you're just not unlocking their real potential. If
100%. Yeah, 100%. And there's this unique window happening, I think, in organizations today where you've got all these different generations are working together in the organization. I mean, there's still the youngest boomers are still working
yeah,
in the end of their careers. And then you've got, of course, Gen Z in the lowest kind of entry level positions now. And I just think there's this match just waiting to happen for the organizations that can see it, in that the boomers are retiring. And what do we know that's important to the boomers in the end stages of their careers? This idea of passing on their knowledge, sharing all of their, kind of expertise. They are natural mentors. If you just build the little program
mhm,
that matches the Gen
mm,
Zs with the boomers, the Gen Z is going to get the benefit of all of their experience and all of their knowledge and their journey. And then the boomers are going to get the benefit of this idea of passing it on to the next generation.
yeah,
And I just,
mm,
it's such a organizational miss. I think people make it maybe more complicated than it has to be. Um, but ultimately, we're we're solving for two risks. The first risk is that we're going to mitigate boomers leaving the organization with all of their human capital still in here and not cascaded out to the organization, and that's a big risk. And then we're gonna mitigate the risk of Gen Z leaving and going to the next organization that's figured this out, that's figured out the
mm,
mentorship, that's figured out the coaching, and it's just not that complicated. But I don't know, how it goes in organizations. If it's not on the radar of the C-suite or the executive team, if it's not something that they are caring about or aware of in their
yeah.
organization, it just doesn't happen. And then that's how this cycle just keeps repeating itself.
Laura, when you spoke before about leaving high school and then backpacking across Europe because of curiosity you had about other cultures, where do you think that came from?
That's a great question. I think that ultimately came from my parents, because both my folks were immigrants to Canada. So my mom came over from the UK in 1968, and my dad, he escaped from Czechoslovakia when the Russians invaded, and the country kind of took this communist turn. My dad actually escaped. Oh my gosh, it's a story for another day. But he escaped, and he wound up in Canada. And they both just had, well, sadly, my dad passed away in June of last year. But they both, my mom still and my dad then, had just this spirit or this desire to see all the corners of Canada and all the corners of the US. And we just traveled all the time from a very, very young age. And they both always said to me how important it was to not just be book smart, but to be people smart and to understand people's stories and where they came from. Because what you see on the outside, if you just leave it at the surface, you really miss so much of people's journeys that took them to the places where they are when you meet them. And they always say, like, don't compare, don't complain, and don't criticize. Like, when you are traveling, you are
Mm.
in somebody else's world, and the best thing you can do is just be curious and ask a lot of questions. And I believe that what they wanted me and my brother to understand is that ultimately we're all the same. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. Like, we all want the same things. We want, a happy, healthy family, and we want a good, group of friends and community that we can count on. We want to provide for our loved ones. We want to live in relative peace and
Yeah.
tranquility, and we want to be able to, experience some things and have a little bit of fun. And that, I think, that is just the common denominator all around the world. That's what people want. And I ultimately think that's really what shaped who I became as a leader. Is this just hyper collaborative, believing that no matter what your position is in the company, you have a story to tell, and you have something to add to, whether it's how we're looking at a problem or trying to solve a problem, or how we're trying to move the business forward. And I love that aspect of leadership, is that, getting out of the ivory tower, so to speak, and just get in the front lines of your business, and start talking to the folks that are
Mhm.
doing the job of executing your brand promise, whatever that is. Get to the front lines of your business and engage with those people, because chances are that they've identified the problem long before you're going to know in the boardroom that there's a
Yeah.
problem, and chances are they've already figured out a workaround solution to deal with that. But I just think, long way to answer your question. That
No, but
travel,
that ties it in beautifully though.
yeah,
Just that respect that your parents had for, wherever you are, you're in their land. Like, just learn, be curious,
exactly.
not comparing, or just it's not that hard.
No,
It's
honestly.
not it to me, if and I preach this from the top of every mountain. I go back to Maslow's hierarchy.
Yeah,
Like, I got the foundation of the pyramid, whatever pyramid, because there are different styles, different
sure.
breakups. But for me, as long as, like, the physiological is taken care of and the security is taken care of me and my family,
Yeah.
everything else is that's it. That's the only time you're gonna see me stand up and fight and argue and or whatever it may be, or be
Yeah.
fearful. But
Yeah.
everything else is just an area to play, to learn.
Mm,
I don't know. You and I are of the same mindset when it
yeah.
comes to that. It's like, it sounds hokey, but we're all people. We're all, like you said it beautifully. We're trying to, like, get the best for our family, have our
Yeah.
friends, just be part of a strong, secure, safe community.
Yeah.
Have some fun, but no. But I appreciate the way you broke that down. It explains perfectly why you have that kind of mentality you have. Now, the other question that I ask, and I forget if I had this question the first time we sat together. I can imagine the answer, but obviously I want to ask you. Does it make sense from your childhood that this is what you're doing today? How do you explain, or how do you reconcile who you were as a kid to the work you're doing today?
Yeah. And so, yes, resoundingly, yes. Did I always have that confidence that kind of my experiences as a child and how I would raise would kind of ladder up to who I am today? No, I don't think so. I think that with age comes um, hindsight, certainly, and a little bit of wisdom. But I do. I think about my dad's story particularly, um, a lot these days. I think, obviously, with the passing of him last year, I think
Yeah.
it's just normal that you'd be really reflective about his life. And, John, I often think about what it must have taken for him to leave his family, leave his fiance, I mean, he was playing for the Czech national hockey team. He had this, great career in front of him as an air traffic controller. And all of that wasn't enough to make him stay, because in his heart, he valued freedom. He valued everybody's right to individual freedom to live the best life that you can possibly live. He believed that first you need to take care of yourself in order to be able to take care of your family, take care of your friends, contribute to your community. And so I reflect a lot on that and the choices he made to come to Canada. And then it's, I look at myself today and the things that I'm advocating for today. Yeah, and I would say that, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I think that everybody deserves an opportunity to be the best version of themselves, to be able to achieve as much as they can humanly achieve in a lifetime. I really believe that when you unleash that, when you inspire that, when you encourage that in people, I think that's when great things happen. When people truly believe that I can do that, I can solve that problem, I can fill this need for my community, I can be this type of person. And this is where I go back to this positive and compelling vision from the future that is missing from our leaders today. They're more interested, I think, in shining a light on what's going wrong and creating more fear and more anxiety. But man, if we just had leaders in positions that were saying we can do this and we can fix these problems, and you can be a part of that, and you can be a part of that. My gosh, what would that type of leadership inspire in people? So yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because just yesterday I was talking to my father-in-law, whose family immigrated from Greece. My family immigrated from Colombia. So we're talking about that immigrant mentality, what it means, and we talked about it in the scope of parenthood, because he had come from the convalescent home where he was visiting his mom, who's very sick, and his dad had died in 2020. So he was talking about just their culture, how it just, even though he was born here, and similar to me, even though I was born here, the culture was always throughout the house. So there was music from their countries, food from their countries, the vibe from their countries, the celebration from their countries. So his father left Greece to escape. I forget specifically what time period it was, but to escape some kind of invasion. My father left Colombia because he was in Medellin, and obviously there was like drug wars going on, and Pablo Escobar was blowing everything up, and my dad was like, I'm out. So so they leave these countries, and they don't know many people getting here, or none at all, and it's just
Wow.
that immigrant mentality. And the best thing about it is, my father-in-law and I have talked about this as well, is like when we were kids, and they weren't going to let us take advantage of or take for granted what we had. So they would instill those lessons in us, like, you need to appreciate what you have here, because this wasn't always our path in our family based on where I came from. All to
Yeah.
say, where you understand where you come from and you understand what you have. And it's
100%.
incredible for me. My world, my life, my home is much different than what my father could provide for us back then. So it's like he had all this pressure as an immigrant, did the best he could, set my sister up and I for success. And now we're building upon that legacy. But even though he was a blue collar worker, and my family always apologized for that kind of stuff, not being able to give us whatever it may be. I learned the best lessons from him, and just that immigrant mentality of, be grateful for where you are now.
Yeah.
You can work hard and be whatever you want. He
Yeah.
didn't go to college. I went to college, got 2
Yeah.
master's degrees, yada, 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 in one generation.
Yeah.
So in one generation, I just have that appreciation of, for me, that's that immigrant mentality of, okay, let's
100%.
work hard. You have the foundation. You can feed your family. You can shelter your family. What can you do beyond that? It's like always
100%.
reaching, always trying to be brave about that next step. And just that sense of exploration is just incredible.
Well, and it's funny because I look at, obviously my life now, Jim and I are 4 years into our immigrant journey. And I look at what it took for us to make the decision that we were going to leave Canada. Oh my goodness. Like, number one, that was a really big decision for both of us.
Yeah.
And we weren't sure. Like, I think maybe he was a little bit more certain than I was, but I don't know. Like, it's a different country, a different language. And, of course I am predisposed to this, this kind of gypsy spirit, I suppose, of wanting to see the world and be embedded with all these different cultures and all these different people. But man, I think back to the last 4 years and the lessons that I took from my dad that I didn't even know that I was taking from him in the
Mm.
moment. This idea of,
Yeah.
learning another language and learning other customs and I look at the experiences that we have had in the last 4 years, and I'm blown away. Like, I'm a different person. I'm becoming Mexican. I'm becoming the country that I live in, and it's so much easier for me to see now. While the media does a great job of talking about all the things, violence related and cartel related to Mexico, and you sometimes maybe get a sense where, like, oh my gosh, the whole country must be like that. And, I'm here, I'm 4 years in, and I'm like, no, that's just, yes, there are parts of the country that have big problems with that. But by and large, that does not define this country. I think I would
Mm.
define this country as faith, family, friends, community, food, and
Yeah.
this spirit of, yes, we can. Like, that is the vibe that I think is in Mexico, and why its trajectory is rising, is because the people here just have this, yes, we can. Like, we're just going to figure it out. And I really like that. I really like that part of the Mexicans, the Mexican spirit. But yeah, I'm 4 years into my own immigrant journey.
Yeah. So, and it's funny, you say you didn't recognize certain traits or values, however you had mentioned it, that it came from your dad, until maybe afterwards you were thinking about it after his passing. But it's incredible. When I was contributing to a book and writing about my coaching journey and kind of tracing that back to the wall to see where that came from, and it stemmed from my dad's,
Yeah,
his way of being, his way of helping, um, just assisting others, just always being there for others. So it's incredible what we learn, even, as adults,
yeah,
even while we still have our parents, after the fact, we're still learning just how much we got from them. It's incredible.
100%. Oh, it's a great reminder of, like, the kids are paying attention. Like, when you're sitting around the family kitchen table
Yeah.
and you're sharing your meals and you're talking about your day, the kids are listening, and
Yeah.
they might
Even
not be getting it all, and they might not be putting it all together yet, but it is going. I've just finished reading this another great book, friend, The Power of the Subconscious Mind, and I think it's just a good example of, you are your environment, and when you're
yeah.
sitting around that table with your kids, they are listening to you, and though that is going to come to fruition at some point on their journey, but don't underestimate um, the
It
power of the
yeah.
influence that you have on your kids.
Yeah, it's so funny. It's so funny. Just like little things where they pick up like mannerisms of mine or phrases that I say. It's just incredible how you're right. They don't do it intentionally, but it just kind of reverberates through the house
Yeah, yeah,
at every level, whether it's something you say, the way that you are with other people, what they see. I love that. I think that's one of my favorite parts of parenthood, is just being able to set the example for that next generation. Just the little habits, even if I say hello to a stranger, or thank you to a stranger, just, any little thing like that.
yeah,
If they pick that up, I'll be happy.
yeah.
Laura, the next question: what do you consider your superpower?
Oh
That
boy.
one, I don't think we covered. I don't think that was part of my script in the first
This is
conversation.
a new one,
This
John.
is a new one. This is a
Oh,
curveball. But what do you, yeah, I'm always curious what somebody will give themselves credit for. That's why I asked that question. I want
yeah,
somebody to say, this is my thing.
it's a great question. I would say that my superpower is empathy. I have a really strong ability in sensing what is below the surface, what people aren't saying, what they aren't articulating. And honestly, now that you asked the question, I think about it, I think it probably comes from the amount of travel I've done around the world, and just really having to, when you don't speak the language, you're like super honed in on nonverbal cues and trying to read the room and trying to read the situation. And what that has lended itself to today is that I just get these feelings. Like I can just sense it when there's maybe more to the story. There's something that's not being said. Someone's feeling a little bit off. I just sense it. I can feel it. And then that just prompts me to ask different questions, keep the conversation going, and trying to get to the heart of the matter. Because I also believe that if we can't get to the heart of the matter, if we can't get the truth on the table, so to speak. I'm looking at another great book on my desk right now. I don't know if you've read this one, but also.
No. Oh, wait. Who's the author on that one?
Susan Scott.
Okay.
Amazing. And that's really the whole principle, is just you gotta get the truth on the table, and you gotta be really good at sensing when the full story is not there. There's something below the surface, because you're just not gonna you're just not gonna fix anything unless you get to the truth. And so I would say that skill of I can just sense it.
Yeah.
I think that's I would probably say my superhuman skill.
That's awesome. I believe that totally, because if you're not getting to the core of what the issue is, the real reason, and it takes kind of being able to open other people up by asking questions to get to that transparency or vulnerability, whatever you want to call it. But it is interesting. Like if you don't get to that core and you start working on something else, like your foundation is just shaky. You're not
100%.
starting from ground zero. So
100%.
I appreciate that. That's powerful, and it's important, I think.
Oh, totally. Like you think about in organizations, the amount of time and resources that are spent on fixing symptoms of problems.
Yes.
It is absolutely mind-boggling, where you think like, gosh, a little bit of coaching on getting to the heart of the matter as leaders, getting people to just put the truth on the table and then start solving for those problems. Oh my gosh, just think like what would the world look like if we had leaders that were skilled in that area?
It's just some questions. It's just some questions. Even before I got my master's in organizational psychology, I was always curious like that. I would always ask, like, if there was a cycle of work, if there was seasonal work and we finished projects based on where they fell in the year, and you knew we were going to do it next year, and there was like no debriefing at the end. Like it was always like, we'll handle it as it comes. We'll put out fires as they come up, as they break out. But there was never any debrief. And I got looked at like I had three heads.
Sure.
If I was like, when's the debriefing? Like, when are we going to talk about what worked well, who did something other people aren't sure of that they could teach us? Like, when can we learn from each other, so that the next go around, it's not going to be perfect, but it'll be a little smoother. But people don't really understand it. I think for certain people, there's pride or bravado, maybe, in intentionally walking through the fire.
Yeah.
Like we handled everything that came up. So we got through it. It's not broken. So there's no need to fix it kind of mentality.
Yeah. Well, and I think we're in this period of time where things are moving so quickly all the time now. Like that's just the new pace of play. Like change is no longer an event you can, next June, we're going to have this change in the business and let's build a plan against it like that. Those are the old days. Things move way too quickly. You couple that with, all the disruption from technology. You couple that with the research coming out about people's attention spans these days, specifically Gen Z. I mean, we're all suffering from it because of the devices in our hand, but that is having real implications on leadership. Leaders feel like they constantly have to move quickly. They have to act quickly, decide quickly, right the ship quickly. And so, I'm learning, one of the things we're studying in school right now, kind of related to the future of leadership, is this idea. They're calling it mindful leadership. And basically the idea is the leaders of the future, those that are going to win the future, are the ones that have the ability to slow down to go fast. They have the ability
Yeah.
to frame, like, is this urgent? Is this important? Is this neither? I'm going to hit pause. I'm going to do a bit of an evaluation. I'm going to take a bit of a temperature
Hmm.
check. I'm going to
Yeah.
think about that critically, because while our
Yes.
attention span is diminished, our ability to critically think about things has also diminished. And that is posing a really big leadership deficit, a really big leadership risk. And this idea of this mindful leadership practice is gaining steam as something that leaders of all levels in the future are going to need to be really good at slowing down so they can critically think about problems, slowing down so that they can collaborate, slowing down because they understand that the leader should not be keeping up with this rapid pace of play, because
Yeah.
that's when things go sideways, is when you think you have to speak right away and act right away and determine the next steps right away. But it takes great
Mhm.
discipline when people are like, let's go, let's go, let's go. It takes a lot of discipline to be like, well, no,
Yeah.
we're just gonna hold tight for a second. Let's just catch our breath and really think about this.
Yeah, that's how I knew the organizational psychology masters was a good fit for me, because that's not saying I always got it right, wasn't always the best worker, but that was always like, why are we setting ourselves up for failure? If
Yeah.
we can prepare for something as best as possible and find out from people here, whoever has the strengths in certain areas, or whoever we can help and what they have to, like certain things like that, before you go into something, let's prepare. If it's going to be a
Yes.
war, let's prepare for it. After, let's kind of do our little debrief, see what went well, what didn't, and how we can
Yeah.
tweak it. It's just incredible. But there is, again, it's like this badge of honor that I made it through. I'm barely walking, but I made it through. So that is almost like the only marker of success, that we made it through.
Totally.
Who knows how much better it could have been if we took the time to, again, be mindful of our approach before things started, our ability to reassess as things were going on. But
100%.
yeah,
Well, and to bring it back to our good friend, Coach John Wooden, like, he was the master of, he really believed that the battle is won in the preparation. Like,
yeah,
if you're starting to think about victory in the game,
yeah,
like, forget about that. The battle is won in the preparation, how you prepare yourself for whatever it is, your challenge, your departmental challenge, your organizational challenge, your personal challenges. The battle is won in the preparation.
yeah.
And I subscribe to that wholeheartedly. The better you prepare, the better your outcome's going to be.
Yeah, as time was leading up to us sitting down for this conversation, just this morning, I was like, okay, Coach Wooden, what was it that stood out that Laura shared last time? And it was that, where
Yeah.
he spoke about, if you do the work in practice, when you get out there, it'll take care of itself.
Yeah. He never, ever, ever talked about game night, ever. He didn't ever say, well, you got to get ready for this team and this team. No, he put all of his effort into the practice. Like, even like practice one every year. This is how you put your socks on so
I
you don't
remember
get
that.
the wrinkle. Like,
Yeah,
mind mind blowing. He lived in the details of preparation. And it's, this is why I love his story, is because, for those of us that, or for our friends that love to live in the facts are indisputable. I mean, back to back to back to back championships, undefeated seasons, coach of the
yeah,
year umpteen times. Look at all the successful NBA players that came out of his tutelage. And, you cannot argue his facts, and his facts was his record. And
yeah.
he achieved that literally through a singular focus on preparation.
Laura, now jumping into your book, why don't you, and it is your book we're going to cover, why don't you provide the title of the book and then how the book came to be? What was the lead up? What was it that kind of triggered you into thinking, okay, I want to put this book together?
Well, the book is called The Great Resignation: How a Culture of Coaching and Appreciation Can Help You Win the War for Talent. I wrote this book actually right after I left Canada and was kind of settling into life here in Mexico. Of course, we had just lived through the COVID time, and the sheer amount of people that had decided that they were just gonna, well, change careers, change jobs, do something different, was staggering. Just it's unseen in modern employment times. So I was really curious about how much of this was like a COVID phenomenon where people just decided, this is a break for me. I'm going to do something different, or how much of the reasons why people chose to leave their jobs were just organizational truths that many of us that have been studying leadership for a long time always knew to be true. And so I just kind of poured into the research, and yeah, I mean, I found that behind the title of The Great Resignation were the same truths that have kind of plagued unhealthy organizations since the dawn of time. People weren't having, there was no career opportunities. They felt like there was no room for them to grow. Nobody cared about their growth. There was no coaching and no development. The middle leaders, the middle managers in the organization didn't have any skill in leading and engaging the team. They felt just undervalued and unseen and unappreciated for the work that they were doing. Or in some cases, the culture was just toxic. Those were kind of the big 5 reasons that came out of the research. And that just told me that it was the same old. People are leaving for the same reasons, but COVID kind of provided this.
Mhm.
Everybody was, sent to kind of work remotely at home, and the change of scenery and the change of perspective just was a breaking point for people to say, I've not respected my boss for a long
Yeah.
time. It's time for me to get out. The culture here is toxic. It's time for me to get out. And so I wanted to write about that, but not from the typical, like, here's all the problems. Yeah, the first part of the book, I take a bit of a deep dive into each of those 5 phenomenon, but I was just more interested in what are the solutions? What are some tactical things that leaders can do, whether that's in their team, in their department, or in their organization, to solve those things once and for all, and to kind of build these cultures that people wanted to be a part of. So I wrote the book. I published it myself. I did self-publishing on Amazon. And lo and behold, to my surprise, my complete surprise, because I'd never done anything like that before, the book did really well. And it ended up getting picked up by a big New York publisher. They republished it in August of last year. And so,
Congrats.
yeah, and so even
Amazing.
that, I just like to share as like, dude, you don't need anybody to give you permission to do anything. If you wanna write a book, there are so many tools out there to help you today. Write it, publish it on Amazon. You
Mm.
literally don't know what's going to happen. But I think that imposter syndrome and these tapes we tell, well, I'm not an author and I'm not a writer, and oh, I can't do
Yeah.
that. I just think they hold us back from even trying. So yeah, the book did really well. It turned into a whole bunch of, now this is what I do. I go to organizations and I talk about how to empower the organization's leaders to make meaningful change that their employees can actually see and feel and experience.
That's incredible. Um, so how did you set the book up? Can you give an overview just of that path that you take the reader on? Did you break it up into sections, or you had said you had broken up into components, but
Yeah.
what does that look like? What's that ride you take the reader on?
So the first part of the book I call Why They Leave. So the ride that I take the reader on there is just like, look, let's just get into the weeds on the big 5, the big 5 reasons why people leave their organizations. And then kind of at the end of each of those first chapters, there's a number of reflective questions in there for you to think about who you are as a leader, what your experience is like in your organization. And then I very quickly pivot in part 2 because I want to be empowering. I don't think the world needs any more people shining a light on all the things that are not going well. So I really quickly pivoted into, great. So what can we do about that? What kind of things do we need to do organizationally? I talk a lot about coaching leadership and appreciative leadership as two big weapons we have at our leadership disposal to counter a lot of that, because appreciative leadership tells us that, you just want to shine a light on the good things that people are doing in your organization, because it's human nature for us to want to be seen and appreciated. So if we see Sally being appreciated for, going above and beyond to take care of a client, and she gets appreciated and formally recognized for that, chances are I'm going to start to mimic that same behavior because I want to be appreciated and recognized too. So I really wanted to give, leadership skills, tactical things that people could do to counter each one of these kind of big five. I talk a lot about mentorship. I talk a lot about how to give effective feedback. I break down kind of a 4-step model. It's very tactical. It's very much like, here's how to give feedback. Here's how to coach. Here's how to build a mentorship program. I had someone build a website for me for this book, the Great Resignation Toolkit.com, where folks can go there and they can download, like I just give it all away for free. Here's sample development plans, training plans, performance management plans. Like it's literally all there for people to use, because I think that's the missing piece, is just, yes, here's the problems, but man, like here are the things that you can do tomorrow. Here's how you can show up differently tomorrow to start to counteract that. And I think that whether the Great Resignation, people are going to learn from it or not, organizations are going to learn from it or not, those 5 things are never going to change. That those 5 reasons, whether it's time of the Great Resignation, the time of low unemployment, high unemployment, it doesn't matter. Top talent has a choice. If you want to attract the best of the best to your organization, you got to fix these 5 problems in a meaningful way, because that's what people want in the place they work at.
Laura, just back to back, what are the 5 things?
First is just a lack of career opportunities. People feel like there's nowhere to go. There's no investment in coaching and development. So there's no feedback, no training, no coaching, no development plans. Middle managers, so the folks in the middle of the organization, have most likely been promoted because of skill. They're the best widget maker, but they have been given no leadership training. So they do not know how to lead. Number 4 is
I laugh only because that's usually where I come in with organizations, and I laugh because I know it's a problem that could be avoided in the companies that I've worked with. It's essentially, we have somebody that has been an amazing individual contributor. Now we want to move them up, but we know that doesn't translate automatically, that there is more that they need, more support, sounding board, whatever it may be. But it's amazing. I laughed, and maybe I shouldn't, that so many companies do just think that the best individual contributor is the one that's going to be the best leader.
Dude, it is wild to me. And so this book is really well sourced too. Like, none of it is my opinion. It is all backed. I put all of my sources in the back of the book. But it's a massive problem that I'm going to butcher the stat. It's like 70% of folks that get promoted into leadership positions in organizations get no leadership training whatsoever. Yeah. And so it's not surprising that, we're in the place that we're in. But that's number 3. Number 4 is just that senior leaders are wildly out of touch. I call it CEO disease. The folks at the top of the organization have no idea what's happening in the bottom of the organization. They have no idea how their program systems and tools are showing up for the folks that are using them. Number 5 is that just employees basically just feel undervalued, unappreciated, unseen, and all of that together leads to this kind of toxic workplace culture. And I think that if you can make meaningful strides against those 5, you're going to fix number 6, which is the toxic workplace culture.
Laura, so overall, not naming names or companies, anything like that, but overall, what have you seen, or have you seen that companies have started to learn to kind of right the ship based on the lessons of the Great Resignation during COVID? In what you're reading about, maybe somebody you're not involved with, or what you see in the news, what overall, do you think companies have learned that lesson? Not perfectly, but that things are kind of turning around and they're really intentional about just the attention, the acknowledgement that they give to their organizations, to their teams, to their people?
Oh, that's a good question.
That's a loaded question.
It is. I think that there are some. I kind of look at it like in a roster. I think probably about 20% of organizations get it. They get all these things, and they're the ones that are never struggling to find people. They're the ones that have really low turnover, really good kind of year on year sales growth. There's that just 20% that they're just getting it. They're doing all these things. I think there's 20% of the organizations at the bottom that aren't doing any of these things, and they're just churning and burning through people. And I think their P&Ls and their results would speak to that. I think the rest are somewhere in the middle. I think there's probably kind of 60% of organizations that are doing some of these things really well, not doing some of them. Maybe they're doing some of these things inconsistently, but they're trying. They're trying to make that cultural transformation, but it's hard. I actually have a new ebook series coming out in a few short weeks about that specifically. It's 2 books. The first one is like, look, if you recognize that your organization's got opportunities from a culture perspective, how do you go about doing an effective evaluation so that you're getting to the truth, so that kind of what the biggest challenges are? So that's kind of book 1, is walking them through what I call a multi-method evaluation. So how do you use multiple sources of evaluation to triangulate kind of the biggest areas that are your company's opportunity? Book number 2 is how do you change? Like, how do you literally go forth and make that transformation happen? Because I think that is where the challenge is. I think companies know that something's not right. They're not as good as they could be. Their culture isn't as great as it could be. They're doing some things. Maybe they're doing these surveys and they're getting all this feedback and they're understanding that they have some problems. But man, like, change is hard. Here's another good book, Leading Change by John Kotter. Like, I think it's one of the best books on making change happen, but it's a skill. And when you think back to our earlier conversation about middle managers getting promoted and nobody is getting leadership training, well, man, just because something needs to change doesn't mean you know how to make it change. I think that's the biggest problem, is that there's maybe a lot of awareness on the problem that needs to change, but just a lack of skill in actually building the change plan. It has to be that prescriptive. You need to build a change plan to make these initiatives stick and become the new culture. So I think that's where kind of the mess is in the middle, in that 60%.
Yeah, and I mean, organizations are systems. People are systems in the way they think, and I think organizations think like people, where it's like, okay, it's a huge undertaking. The only way to make change is to make monumental changes. That we're going to have to spend millions and billions of dollars to make change. The thing is, no, like, it can be small, it can be incremental, it can be habits that can be measured. Obviously, I leave it to you and your work to share with them how. But that's the biggest thing is, to make change, you don't have to spend a shit ton of money to get there.
You don't have to spend any money. It's like a mind shift. You need to teach people, because there's actually a process for making change happen. A really good process. You just need to teach people the process and then follow through. And that costs nothing. You don't need to spend any money, except maybe the money to give some training to your leadership folks, especially those in the middle, where change goes to die, is in the middle leadership roles in your organization. And then, to your point, it is about habit stacking. It's about one small change. And in my coaching world, I talk about this all the time. I'm like, dude, I call it 3 darts. What are the 3 darts we're going to throw this quarter? We're going to focus on these 3 things and these 3 things only. And in the moment, it doesn't seem like a lot. But when you stack those 3 things over the course of the year, next thing you know, you're at the end of the year, you've accomplished 12 initiatives
Yeah.
in a sustainable way. But yeah, it's about stacking those habits or stacking those change goals on top of each other to get some pretty big results.
Laura, I'm curious. I always ask my authors who come on as guests, in writing this book and putting this out there, how did your views of the topic of the material, how did that change, or how did it change you? You can go in there knowing your stuff, being prepared, doing the research, organizing your outline, have it all down pat. You know what you're talking, but there's something that kind of changes or evolves in you in the course of writing it, in the course of getting it out there. So did anything shift in your mindset, in your mind, based on writing the book, getting it out there?
It's a great question. I think the biggest thing that changed for me was around this middle leaders in the organization. And I think I had maybe intuitively kind of felt like, yeah, there's some opportunity there to, I think my thinking was narrow. I was like, well, these guys need to be really good at, number one, feeding information up because their bosses or their leaders are in the senior leaders. And then how do they kind of filter information down to their teams? That's kind of where my thinking was. But then I started getting into the weeds on the data. And I was actually blown away by the lack of leadership training given to those being promoted to leading people for the first time. I was actually, the statistics are so staggering. And I think that John led to this domino effect for me that I was like, of course there's all of these problems. Of course there's toxic culture. And of course there's the lack of coaching and feedback and of course that's true. We're literally promoting the best widget maker into this leader of people with no training. And then we're surprised when the wheels start to fall off the bus. And I think that just awakened a bit of an avalanche in me about the responsibility of leadership. I think about if you've ever worked for a bad leader, and I think, I've had a couple, I'm sure everybody can think back to a time where that was their situation. Dude, it is horrific. I call it the 4 o'clock, leadership test. How are your people feeling at 4 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon before they got to get back to work? Because I remember back to those couple of folks that I worked for, anxiety, dread, stress. And that just doesn't impact me. That impacts my husband, my family, my friends, my health, everything. And so that sent me down. And I reference a study here in this book of a gal, I think her first name is Anna, and she's at the Karolinska Institute in Sweden. And she did her whole doctoral dissertation following kind of 2 cohorts of people through their careers, ones that work for great leadership, inspiring leadership, does all the things right, and ones that work for the opposite. And she was specifically interested in the health outcomes, when folks would have a heart attack or they'd get sick or something would happen to them. And she was tracking the health trajectory. And, surprise, surprise, those that worked in these great cultures and these great environments with these great leaders had better health impacts. So all of this leading me to this study, then back into this rabbit hole where I find myself today on this kind of soapbox, if you will. Like, man, it's not a joke. If you are leading people, if you are responsible for people, you hold their careers, their livelihood, their mental health, like all of that can go one of 2 ways. It can go, I love my job, I love my team, I love my organization, I feel so inspired and so motivated and so supportive and seen, or to that Sunday afternoon at 4 o'clock where you're just feeling anxious and depressed. And it was a very, very powerful awakening for me, the statistics behind that.
Yeah, that was the one of the greatest realizations I had in all of my leadership work is just realizing. I know it was important, but just realizing just how important a leader is when it comes to who a person is when they leave work. That it doesn't just stop at the threshold of the
No.
front door, the back door, or they don't leave it in the parking lot when they're going home.
Do
It
they bring that
ripples
home to them?
it ripples into everything that person is, into their hobbies, like things they're trying to enjoy in the weekend or at night with their kids,
Totally.
like all of that pressure, all of that stress they carry with them.
Yes.
So
Turns into
that's
fear, anxiety,
yeah,
depression. And it's like we're all here in the world today beating our heads against the wall, wondering how we're going to change the world. How are we going to make things better? Like, dude, let's
yeah,
just start with better leaders. Like
yeah,
let's just start there. Because if you can even move the needle like 25%, if you just get a quarter of the population
yeah.
liking what they do every day for a job and where they work and who they work with, that is going to spider out into their family, their friends, their community, their health, their well-being, just just by doing that.
Yeah, I think you had kind of made a call to action for people to consider the good bosses they worked for, the bad bosses, however you want to put it, bosses they worked for, and to kind of pay attention to what happened in those organizations, how they felt when they left work. And it's incredible. I've worked in an organization where there was a toxic person at the top, and that toxicity just rippled down maybe three levels down to my boss. And
100%.
then I've worked in that same organization when that top person left, and there was a whole different changes and shuffling around. And the change alone is still the same work, still the same hours, still the same team, just subtle changes in the management because that toxic person left. And it was, and what's interesting is that it went from one extreme to the other. It went from a toxic person to somebody who, if they were in the room with everybody, you wouldn't be able to tell that they were the head of the organization. They were friendly. They'd been there for a while, so they knew the work everybody did. They were respectful. They were caring, like all these things, all the
Yeah,
soft things, all the good things. But it's incredible how, and everything rippled down.
right?
If it was the toxic leader, it rippled down because it stressed out the boss underneath them, and they stressed out the boss underneath them. But with the other one, it's like, okay, I trust you guys. We've all been doing this work for so long. And then that same kind of relaxed feeling of trust rippled down through the organization. Same organization within 2 months, completely different
It's
outcomes
wild.
because of that. Because of that. So I believe in that. I'm glad you brought that up because it's very important for a leader to understand. It's not just about the metrics on the P&L statement, the balance
Yeah,
sheet, all that stuff at the end of the quarter, the year, whatever it may be. It's the day in and day out how you're
yeah,
affecting people because
a
eventually
hundred
that
percent,
will hit the business line.
a hundred
Uh,
percent.
Laura, I typically ask what's next for your writing. You kind of broke that down with the ebooks. So I'm not going to ask you what's going to happen after that. Um, and I typically ask what book has inspired you. You've given
Mm.
me, we talked about Coach Wooden's book. You've given me a few books here today, have shared a few of those. Are there any other books that stand out?
Yeah, I think one of the books that I go back to kind of over and over and over again is Good Leaders Ask Great Questions by John Maxwell. I just think that, again, the ability to ask great questions, it can help you be a better coach, certainly can help you be a better leader, help you diagnose problems better, help you be a better collaborator.
Mm.
That is just such a powerful book. I recommend it all the time. I go back to it kind of over and over again. It's one of those books that Fierce Conversations and Leading Change is like a little circle of grounding. But I think that that's something, especially for new leaders. Gosh, if you really want to start to unlock some potential,
Yeah,
I would start there.
love it. Yeah, the questions is just incredible. I've always said you could have a leading conversation by just asking questions.
100%.
That you don't have to put out any kind of statement, any kind of direct, that you could lead somebody just by asking questions about their ability, what they see, their perception, who have they talked, like all of that stuff. And I think it's good for somebody to learn that for
Yeah.
conversations, just being able to ask somebody else questions that gets to connection. And then obviously that sets the example for the person you're asking. Okay, so wow, there is a lot to asking questions and really digging deep and getting to know somebody, getting maybe past that facade they're putting up to
Yeah.
that real foundation that we can really actually successfully work off of. Laura, and wrapping up, what are you up to these days? Is there anything else you want to share besides what we've covered? Anything that I didn't ask? Anything at all? The floor is yours.
Oh my gosh, no, I'm just, I think that the biggest thing I'm up to these days is, to quote Stephen Covey, I'm sharpening the saw. Habit number 7, back at school, really trying to learn as much as I can about what the future of leadership is going to require, so that I can, share that knowledge with others. I just think the best leaders, they're
Hmm.
always learning. They're always trying to get new information, new skills, new perspectives, so that we can kind of pass that down to other leaders. So that's my big mission these days.
Yeah, semi retirement looks good on you. Like all the stuff you're into. I saw you posted pictures from your visit to Charleston. So is
Yeah.
that something you'll have to go to like once a quarter, once a year? How does that
Yeah.
work?
Once a year we go and we have a big, residency, they call it. It's a really immersive experience. So I had my
Okay.
first one this year and I'll go back next January. But yeah, I just cannot say enough good things about the school, the program, the faculty, the folks in my cohort. I mean, gosh, you learn as much from your cohort who's on the crazy ride with you
Yeah.
than you learn
Yeah.
from the professors and the books. But
Yeah,
so
that was
far
I
so
think that was one
good.
of my favorite parts of my master's programs was just you're in there with people from different industries.
Right?
It wasn't an international school, but you would have thought it was just because there were people from all over the world in my master's
Yeah.
program, in my MBA program. So it's incredible how much you learn if you look for it, if you take advantage of it. There's just amazing people in there usually,
100%. Yeah, 100%.
and it doesn't hurt that it's in Charleston. That's a great city. It doesn't hurt.
Does not hurt at all.
And again, we covered Laura's book, The Great Resignation, How Coaching and Appreciative Leadership Can Help You Win the War for Talent. Laura, thank you for sitting down again. I look forward to another conversation in the future.
Perfect. My pleasure. Great to see you, John.
Great to see you. And if there's anything that I might have missed, anything that I should have asked Laura, something you think maybe I missed or a question to throw out there, please reach out to me. I'll reach out to her, see what kind of additional insight, guidance, knowledge, wisdom I can get from Miss Darrell herself. In the meantime, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye.